Hey everybody, you're listening to the Katana Podcast with me, Invisible Katana, and today I'm going to talk about a subject that I think a lot of gamers always have on their mind. It's always like, I want this game, I love this game in the past, and I wish I could get it now. I wish that I could get a new version of it, whether it was an HD re-release or a full-on remake of the game. I think a lot of gamers have a ton of different ideas as to what games they would love to have, what games they wish were already out. And while we do have some, we have like our trilogy HD collections, and in some cases, like God of War, we have like, pretty big mega collections, like full saga collections. And these are just like the top five games, or these are the top five on my list at least of game franchises that I would like. Some of the games on here is just like a big grouping of different games because it's just, if it's just a really long franchise, then I just didn't want to be like this game here and then, make a giant top 10 list when really like five of the games are from one franchise. So these are just like the top five franchises that I really want to see redone. And starting off with number five, it's actually an older game that me and my cousin used to play like crazy. And I think if it was remade, it could be remade really, really well. It would be really fun. It could even be upped because this game is actually Star Wars Jedi Power Battles. And I don't know how many of you guys might remember that game or not remember that game, but it was a really fun, just hack and slash Star Wars game. And you sort of go through episode one. That was when it came out. And it was a fun game. You get to choose your characters. You could be Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan. They had some other characters that weren't really popular unless you like read the books and stuff like that. But they had like Plo Koon, who was the guy with the yellow lightsaber. They had a female character, and I can't think of her name, but she was the first Jedi that I'd ever seen use a lightsaber upside down until Ahsoka came out, which was years and years later when they made the Clone Wars TV show on Cartoon Network. Before that, it had only been one other Jedi, and she was in the Jedi Power Battles game, so she was really cool to me. I believe the fifth character you could play as was Mace Windu, and at the time, I had it on PlayStation. I do believe you could do up to 4 players if you had the expansion thing. I could be wrong about that, but if they re-release that game, there are so many elements to it. Like, it could go not only through episode 1, but it could go through all the prequels or even all of the films. That would be a really big task, and I highly doubt that would happen. And I'm about 110% sure that unfortunately this game would never be re-released, or I mean, it couldn't be done up in HD, really. I guess technically it could if they could do Final Fantasy, but it's a PlayStation game, so even in HD it's gonna kind of look like crap. But I would love this game. I would love it if they remade this game. Like I said, if it went through all 3 films. Maybe it couldn't really go through the original trilogy because there wasn't as much action and stuff. But if it went through the first 3 games, it would be amazing, especially if they re-released it and it came out and it actually had multiplayer where you could play up to 4 characters. There were, I believe, like 3 unlockable characters. One was Queen Amidala. You could play as her. You could play as her bodyguard. And of course, my personal favorite was Darth Maul. You could unlock him. The only downside to that was unlocking Darth Maul wasn't as epic because he only used one side of his lightsaber. So it's like that kind of blows to me. Like it's Darth Maul. Like he's the guy with the double-sided lightsaber. And even when you unlock him, it's like, oh, well, that kind of sucks. He only uses one side. But it's a really fun game. I remember me and my cousin played through that like crazy. When we found out the cheat codes to unlock the other characters, that was really cool because, like, Padme, of course, doesn't actually have a lightsaber. It's like if she was actually in the battle, she would only use her gun. And it had its downside because, of course, you couldn't reflect blaster lasers or laser blast, whatever. You couldn't reflect because she didn't have a lightsaber to reflect with. But it was cool. It was like you can't shoot with any of the other characters. She has a gun. Her bodyguard gets a gun, and you can play as them, and you can shoot in this game, and it's just, a little thing that you can have, and I would love to see that game redone. Like I said, it was incredibly fun for me. It had some difficult moments, some of the challenging parts of the game. It was one of those games where you share lives, and I will never forget, Tatooine had this one section where it was basically just platforming, and you had to jump on these pillars, and my cousins, like, no matter which cousin I played with, everybody would always lose there. And it's like, we can't beat the game because everyone kept losing their lives on the same level. They'd use up all the lives, and we'd never be able to make it to the end. So that was like just a funny thing I can remember. But I love that game. It was a great Star Wars game. Like there are a ton of great ones. There are some bad ones out there. Really, the ones that are actually based on the movies, oddly enough, are bad, except for the Star Wars arcade one. That game's amazing. But all like this offshoot sort of Star Wars games, it's like in the first film, but at the same time, it does a lot of crazy stuff because you can pick all these different characters and stuff. It's a really, really fun game, and I wish that would get remade. It was so fun. It could be redone with amazing graphics. They could add new abilities and stuff. It could, like I said, have multiplayer to it. And go through all three of the prequel films instead of just the Phantom Menace. Add way more unlockable characters. Add like Count Dooku and maybe Yoda or some crazy stuff like that. Jango Fett. All those different things. I think it would be a great game that would actually sell really well if they marketed it the right way and kind of told people like, hey, remember that fun game. And like I said, I don't really know the sales on that game or anything. I could be one of the few people, in the grand scheme of things, it could only be like a few people who really love that game, and I could kind of be on my own. But I would definitely consider, I don't know 100% if I'd buy it. It would really depend on the cost. And like I said, if it had online multiplayer, it would definitely boost it up for me because I already loved the game, and that was when I played with just one other person. I can only imagine how fun it would be if it was actually 4 players online, and we got to all pick different characters and stuff, and even with the unlockable characters, which I'm sure with games these days it would end up coming out to DLC, unfortunately. But it would be so fun. I think that's a really odd one. I guess that's probably the weirdest choice I have on this list is like Star Wars Jedi Power Battles, and I'm honestly, unfortunately, I think all the games on my list will never get remade. There's a couple towards the end that I think might actually make it at some point in the future. People have been looking for these games to get remade forever, but those maybe. But I think everything else on my list is kind of just me being really, really hopeful, and I want them to come out, but I don't really know. But to get to number 4, and this is the first one that actually has multiple games to it, it's actually Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2 from the films. Those 2 games are some of the best movie-based video games, and it's kind of easy to do that because of course it was Spider-Man, so it's not like it's the most difficult thing ever to make a game based off of a movie, which is also based off of a comic book, which in the past has already gotten like who knows how many games. So it's kind of the same thing with like some of the X-Men games. It's like they make games based off of the movies. The one for the third movie really sucked, so that one I wouldn't want remade. But like the X-Men 2 game, I love that game, and that's one of the games I wish had a sequel, but they always seem to do that. Whenever there's a X-Men movie that's really based on Wolverine, like X-Men 2 and X-Men Origins, the games come out, like X-Men 2 I thought was a great movie. The game I thought was really good. X-Men Origins was a so-so movie to me. I think everyone else kind of just flat out hates it. But the game for that is the best game ever. And, both those games end on cliffhangers that'll never get resolved. And I might end up doing a whole conversation or a whole different podcast on those 2 games because I would love those to get remade. But Spider-Man 1 and 2 were so much fun to play, and Spider-Man 2 I think is the Spider-Man game. Like everyone just loves Spider-Man 2. Everyone remembers like, man, Spider-Man 2 had it all. It was like you went from Spider-Man 1, you could swing around the city a little bit, you couldn't go to the ground and stuff, but it was a fun game. It had levels you went through, and it had great unlockables. You could unlock the different costumes. They had different modes where you could they had the wrestling mode, they had pinhead bowling, which was fun, they had like a weird survival mode where you fought all the robots and stuff. All that stuff was really cool. Spider-Man 2 came out, it changed the formula. There were some things I liked about it. For the most part, I loved the changes. The only thing I didn't like was that it got what I like to call like open world syndrome, which once you beat it, you can't just go back like, all right, let me do this one mission. It didn't have that, and I wish, once again, that could be a whole other podcast. I wish all open world games would just do that. Like, hey, you beat the game or you just beat a mission. If you want to replay it right now, just go ahead and replay it. Stuff like that. I wish people would do, but no one ever does that. The only game that's done that is GTA so far, and they're tons of open world games. But to get back to Spider-Man 1 and 2, I love both those games. The first game, like I said, had tons of unlockables, and that was probably my least favorite thing about 2, is that the first game had all these unlockables, it had all these special modes, and the second game kind of adds in a sense, it adds in those special modes just simply around the world. You could just go and do some of the extra things, not just activities, but they had like one area where it basically was just a fighting arena, and you would just fight all these different enemies in waves and stuff, and that was really cool. So that was kind of a special mode that you did have to unlock, and I don't know if you had to beat the game to get that, but that was one of the special things. But you didn't get like alternate costumes and stuff like that, and that was really unfortunate, because that's a big thing about Spider-Man. He's had all these alternate costumes and stuff, and it's fun to play that, and especially in certain aspects in some other Spider-Man games where the different costumes give you different elements. Like if you have the symbiote costume, you have unlimited ammo like they did in the first game and stuff like that. So I kind of missed that. That was one of the things I missed. But if they re-release both those games, and they would, if they put them both together, that would be an amazing sell. And I think, honestly, even if it was just Spider-Man 2, that game would sell like crazy, because everyone remembers Spider-Man 2. That's kind of the game everyone always talks about, because that was the first one that really did the open world thing, and now that's like the common formula. And even today, like the Amazing Spider-Man 2 video game, people hate that. Like people say it kind of sucked, and oddly enough, it didn't just suck like, oh, the last one sucked and this one sucks too. The last one everyone actually enjoyed, and then it got worse somehow, which is an unfortunate thing that does happen in games sometimes. But Spider-Man 2 has always been that game where it's like, this was the pinnacle of the Spider-Man games. And it got terrible in Spider-Man 3. I hated Spider-Man 3, the game. Like, that was right towards the end of the life of PS2, when some people started to make games, like, they tried to make them look super realistic and stuff, but it just did not work at the time because it was PS2. And I hated how it looked. I thought, I honestly, the Spider-Man 2 game looks way better than Spider-Man 3. Like, that's just a fact. It just does. Because Spider-Man 3, they tried to do the realistic thing, and it just looks weird. And Spider-Man 2 is just, it looked awesome. Like, they kept that good sort of style, and it looks like a PS2 game, but it was fun. And both those games, if they got re-released, I mean, there's a lot to them individually that makes them worth buying. But if they were re-released together, and they were done up in HD, or completely redone, especially if they were completely redone, that's always a really big key. Like, an HD re-release is really good, and that'll of course hook people, but like a full-on remake will definitely get more people in. And both those games are just really good, and I would love to see those come out redone in HD sometime in the future. They're just really good. Those are two of my favorite Spider-Man games. Like, I think I only have like 4 really big Spider-Man games in my life, and that's definitely 2 of them right there. And the next game on my list is actually another Spider-Man game, and the reason I had to separate this is because this game came way before the movies came out, and this was actually during the time of the Spider-Man cartoon, and it's just called Spider-Man, but it was the one that, it was like the first big Spider-Man game. I think we've had ones before that which were like on Nintendo and things like that. This was like the first Spider-Man game on PlayStation, and it was unbelievably well done. Like, it's such a fun game, and even to this day, like, I haven't played that in I don't know how long. I have no idea where my CD is. I wish I did. Like, I would definitely play that game today if I still had that CD around. But like, there was just so much to that game. Much like the Spider-Man 1 video game from the movie, this game had a ton of unlockables. I think it had more, honestly. It had like all sorts of costumes that I never even heard of, because this was, of course, in the 90s. So this is when I was much younger. I didn't really know all of the stuff about Spider-Man, and a lot of these costumes were probably only in the cartoon for maybe 3 or 4 episodes when they did like a special, but that was it. And they had symbiote Spider-Man. They had like the Captain Universe thing, or whatever they called it, and basically in that one I remember playing it, and you were just invincible in that. It was like, if you wear this, you're invincible. If you wear the symbiote costume, you have unlimited webbing. If you wear like the Spider-Man Universe thing, or Cosmic Spider-Man, I can't remember the special for that one. I didn't really like it. I don't like that costume too much, so I never wore it. admittedly a lot of aesthetic stuff for me. Like, I don't care about the abilities, I just like the costumes. But the costumes were really cool unlockables. The game itself is what's really there, though, because the costumes, unlocking the costumes is, of course, a big deal. They have, like, a ton of, I believe you could collect comic book covers in that game, and you could see all the different covers from Spider-Man over the years. But the game itself was just really, really fun because the story was great in that game. And it started off simple, like you fight, I think the very first level, you fight Scorpion and save J. Jonah Jameson. And then it kind of goes through, Venom comes in, and it's probably one of the best stories from the comic book universe. And it's when Spider-Man and Venom actually team up, because that's when Carnage comes in, and you have to fight the symbiotes. And like, you start off, you fight Venom, you beat Venom, of course, and then Carnage comes in, and it's like, holy crap, this is real danger. And like, everyone's being turned into symbiotes by the smoke. Like, you can't, of course, go down to the city, and that's how they kind of do it in that one. It's like, hey, there's a bunch of smoke here, you can't do that. So you go around, you have to fight symbiotes. And one of the elements of the cartoon that's in this game is that you run into a ton of other characters. You run into Daredevil, I believe you run into Punisher, possibly some of the X-Men. I can't really remember. Like, it's really hard to remember for some reason. I don't know why, but Daredevil was the one that always stuck out to me, I guess, because I think it was because he had, like, the quickest cameo. Like, they come in and he talks with Spidey in, like, one scene, and then he's gone. And I don't know, maybe that's why it stuck with me. But I would love to see that game re-released. Like, that one, there's no way to possibly have multiplayer, any of that stuff. And I guess technically you could if you made it where Venom was in there the whole game. But it was such a fun game, like, even more than the movie games, even though I love them. And of course, Spider-Man 2, you can actually travel around the city, you can walk on the ground, and there's all sorts of intricate upgrades. But if this game was re-released, they could add that element in. Like, you have all the intricate upgrades that current Spider-Man games have. They have all the cool web systems where he kind of uses his Spidey sense to get around, and it slows down time so you can target where you want to go. And if you kind of shoot your web and you jump off at the right angle, it makes you go faster and faster. They can add those elements into that Spider-Man game, and it would be unbelievable. And of course, the graphics would look amazing. Some stuff I think might not translate too well, like the symbiotes as enemies were basically just they were kind of like pink blobs. So if you know the Pokemon Ditto, that's basically what they look like, except they didn't have any faces at all. So that might not translate 100%. If they redid the game today, it would just look really weird. Like, these are literally just blobs, pink blobs. But it was such an amazing game. Like, the costumes, like I said, the unlockables were cool. You fought so many of the big villains. You fought Electro. You fought, like I said, Scorpion, Venom, Carnage. The Lizard was in that game. That may have actually been it, because I kind of remember a lot of them. But it was an amazing game. It was one of my favorite games. It's definitely up there. It's like my top comic book based video games. It's definitely up there. And like I said, this is my number 3 on my list, so it's above even Spider-Man 2 for me. And that, like a lot of people, I love that game because it was done so incredibly well. It's still kind of the pinnacle of open world Spider-Man games. But if they brought some of the current gen elements that we have in Spider-Man games to that old 90s Spider-Man game, it would be great. And I would love to see that done, like, in beautiful graphics like today. And you get even more costumes, and they have all the elements. Get, like, the 2099 and Armored Spider-Man and all the costumes that we have now. Those would be great unlockables. I don't know how much else you could really add to it. Like, it's hard to kind of add unlockables to Spider-Man outside of costumes, but that's kind of the thing. It's really the story that you're going through that's the fun, and getting to see the elements of the cartoons or elements of the movies in some cases, and going through Spider-Man and enjoying that stuff. And I think even though that game was super, super old, that's the one that started it off, and they did it well. Like, I do remember you unlock certain moves. Like, you could do the this sort of yo-yo move. I remember unlocking that, and it was kind of tricky to master, but that was a cool move. And you could, like, sneak up behind people and stuff like that. And just all these different elements I love. So if anyone somehow from Marvel/Disney is listening, please remake that one. Like, if I had to pick one game from the Marvel universe to be remade, it would definitely be that Spider-Man game, because I loved it so much. But to get to my number two game, this is one that I think a lot of people would appreciate if it was re-released. It was done on PS2. Once again, it's a game based off of a movie. It's actually a game based off of a fairly old movie for when this game actually came out, and it's the Warriors video game. The Warriors game is an unbelievable game. It's a great game based off of a great film. It's like a great cult film that came out in the 80s, late 80s. And I don't know what Rockstar was doing. It was just like, hey, this is an awesome movie. We make Grand Theft Auto. Why don't we make a game based off the Warriors? And that's what the Warriors is. It's Grand Theft Auto minus the cars and guns, which for a lot of people might sound like it sucks, but where the cars and guns kind of go away, the great story comes in because they not only let you play through the film, they add backstory to the film. They add elements to the characters that you never knew. They add in characters that aren't even in the film, and they have great stories. They aren't just like one-off characters where it's like, this guy wasn't in the film, I don't care about him. You care about this stuff, like characters that you never got to meet in the gang. It's like you have these other characters in your gang, but they didn't go to the meeting because of course the entire gangs didn't in those movies, or I guess they did, based on how they showed the movies. But it was just a great game, and if they re-released it now, the best thing they could possibly do is have multiplayer, because literally every level of that game has multiplayer in it. You can have two players. It had a really cool split screen thing. I think this was the first game that actually ever did that. And you could, like, if you were close together, that's when it would be one screen, but when you guys split up, then it would split into split screen, so it wasn't always split screen, even if you were like right next to each other. And that was a cool little feature. You could break into stores, you could fight against cops, you could unlock all sorts of abilities. You could unlock the ability to get out of handcuffs if you got arrested. You could gain the ability to handcuff other characters and stuff so they can't, attack you anymore. All sorts of cool stuff. You could unlock extra areas of your basically hub world. Like, you start off in the gang's main base, and then you can leave that area and you can walk around the city. It's not too much of the city. You don't unlock a ton of stuff to walk around in, but it's like a hub area, and you can walk around and break into a couple of stores and go into certain areas and stuff like that. And then the levels themselves are definitely really expansive. Like, every level is definitely fun to play. Like, they have just giant, it's a weird mix of open world but linear, because it is kind of an open world game. It would be like if Grand Theft Auto did get chopped down, and it's, I guess, kind of like how in Grand Theft Auto games you always have to start off in one part of the city and then they unlock the rest of the city throughout the game. It's a lot like that, but it's much smaller, of course, because there's no vehicles or anything like that. So it's not like 20 miles worth of stuff, but it's a lot of stuff to walk around. There are multiple stores to break into. There are different gang members. There could be cops called if you get busted or you screw up, and you set off the alarm to the jewelry store or whatever you're robbing, stuff like that. So they're really big levels, but they're not so big it takes forever to get to them on foot. So it was a great mix of open world but linear, strict levels, and it was so fun to play. The weapons were cool. They had like slow motion finale moves and stuff. Like, if someone was at like the last bit of health and you like hit them with a brick or a bottle, it would like go into slow motion. They had a ton of bonus levels and stuff, or not bonus levels but bonus modes. They had like a survival mode where the only way you could win is if you threw the characters off the building, and you could pick which characters you wanted. They had like another mini game inside of the Warriors video game. It was like a 2D side scrolling beat 'em up type of game. That was really cool, and it had its own story. It was basically what am I thinking? It was basically Double Dragon. So it was really fun, and you unlock even more characters in different little costumes. You can unlock like the ghost version of characters that died in the film, and then you can play as them in some of the other bonus modes where you, like they had, I believe, like spray paint challenges where like the first one to tag, do like a big tag wins. They had the one, like I said, where you throw people off the building, and it was such a fun game, and that I think would sell like crazy. I know for a fact that one I would buy in a heartbeat if it came out, even if that was just an HD re-release. I know for a fact that I would buy that because I loved that game, and unfortunately it was one of my games that got stolen. Like, pretty much all my PlayStation 2 games were stolen, so I don't have that game anymore. And if it got re-released, I would buy it in a heartbeat. And if it got completely remade and they did add, um, full on multiplayer, online multiplayer, it would be insanely well done. Like, it would just be so much fun to play because every level, I think most levels actually have three people. So most of the game you could actually do with three players instead of just one other person. And there are some levels, like I said, where there are only two people, but I think pretty much every level has like three characters, and so you still have, even if you're playing two players, it's you and one other person, and then there's still a computer character to play around with. And so it's just kind of cool. Like, it adds another interesting element to it. Like, oh, we're both playing, and there's still a third character to play around with. So if that got remade and they did it in like full on HD, or it was just an HD re-release, I think the greatest thing they could possibly do, even if they re-released it in standard definition, which would kind of look crappy, especially now. But even if they did, if they added multiplayer to that game, I think there are so many people that would still go ahead and buy it again, or maybe even buy it. Well, maybe not for the first time if it was standard definition, because we live in the age of HD, so it would be a little hard for people to justify a purchase of a game when it's in standard definition. But if you re-release a game, they're not going to do it in standard definition unless they know it's so popular. It's like the first Resident Evil game, or like Final Fantasy 7 before they did like the real HD whatever for that. But I would love to get the Warriors remastered in HD, and if they add a multiplayer to it, it would be the best thing ever. It's such an amazing game. If you haven't played it, try to find it. If you still got a PS2 or Xbox, buy it used or something. It's a great experience. If you haven't seen the film, definitely check out the movie. It's one of my favorite movies. I haven't watched it in a while, but I didn't know what the movie was until I played the game, and I was like, this game is unbelievable. I have to see the movie. And I love the movie just as much as the game. So I'm really glad that the movie led me, like an awesome game based on an awesome movie, led me to actually seeing this awesome movie. So check out the Warriors video game if you haven't, if you can find some way to get your hands on it. And definitely check out the film if you haven't seen that either, because both are definitely unbelievable. And to get to my number one choice for what I want remade, and this is the only other thing aside from, the Spider-Man 1 and 2 stuff, this number one is a collection of games for me, and it's the Resident Evil games. I've mentioned this in a ton of different videos, whether it's either my podcast or some of my other random videos. Resident Evil is my favorite franchise, and like pretty much any really big Resident Evil fan, I want them to remake some of the old games, specifically 2 and 3. I would love it if they remade 0 in HD, kind of like they just did with Resident Evil 1, which I didn't think that would look so unbelievably amazing when they re-released it, because it looks great on GameCube. That's like the best game you could possibly get on GameCube, is the Resident Evil remake. Like, it looks unbelievable. And then when they re-released it, it actually came out with 60 frames per second, and I had no idea. I thought it was just like, okay, it's basically an HD upgrade, because technically, because it was on GameCube, technically speaking, that was standard definition. It looks like an HD game because it's like a pre-rendered game and stuff, so it's easy to make things look way better. But when that came out on like PS3 and stuff, I had no idea it looked so much better. And 60 frames per second is unbelievable for a Resident Evil game. So that right there kind of made me want to get it all over again. And I already have it for GameCube, and that's good enough for me because it still looks amazing. But I would love it if they re-released Resident Evil 0 in HD, and if they flat out remade 2 and 3, because 2 and 3 were like, PlayStation style. So those would kind of have to full out be remade like Resident Evil 1 was. But Resident Evil 0 came out before the remake to Resident Evil 1 did. So that one I'm okay with. Like, that one still looks great. If they redid that like they just did Resident Evil the remake, it would still come out. It would look unbelievably well done in HD, because the game, it doesn't look as good as Resident Evil 1, but that's because it came out before. It may have actually come out after. I think I read that somewhere where like the remake actually did come out before 0 came out. But either way, the game looks great. If they somehow added multiplayer to that, it would be amazing, because I think that was the second game, or I guess technically the third, because the first Resident Evil game that actually had multiplayer was Resident Evil Files. which was like basically it was the precursor to Left 4 Dead. So if you like Left 4 Dead, you should honestly thank Capcom, because that's kind of the exact same formula that Left 4 Dead has. Is from Resident Evil Files, where you pick your characters and you actually get different stories for the characters you pick in that game. So it's actually a little better than the Left 4 Dead story. But each level was kind of just a separate story on its own. So, that was the first one. But Resident Evil Zeros was the first game where if it stuck to the initial formula of the Resident Evil games, but it still could have been multiplayer, and it still could have been great. It could have been two players, because you're always with both characters except for specific parts of the game. But it could easily have been two players, and it would have been an amazing game. It still would have been incredibly scary. Like, it's still the same thing. Like, you have to scrounge for ammo. You can't just shoot everything you see. Certain characters have certain things. Like, Rebecca has she's the one who can combine the plants and stuff. So she combines the herbs, and you can give them to Billy. Billy can take more damage and stuff because he's an older character, and plus he's a male character, so it's like he's a bigger, stronger character. And they have just cool elements to each other. It's like, she combines stuff because she's the medic. He can take more hits because he was like an older character. Like, plus he was in the army. He's like way older than Rebecca because she's 18 years old in that game. But, he's like in the army and stuff, so he's got training, and there's all sorts of little elements that go into it that make perfect sense. And, he takes more damage. You can combine items. You can swap items with the characters. It takes the boxes out of the games, because with the two characters, you could just drop items, and then you swap items with each other. Like, I could drop something as Rebecca, and then Billy just picks it up. And that was such a cool mechanic. Like, it made things very cool for the characters, and it was just a fun experience in that game. And it could have been multiplayer. Like, I would love it if they somehow made that in the game. Like, if they did a full-on remake of that game, which they wouldn't really need to do, because like I said, it already looks great. So, it could easily look better, because that was technically 2 generations ago. So it could look better now for sure. But even if it was just like a little HD update, it would be really cool. But I would love it if they did that and added multiplayer to it. It would be amazing. Resident Evil 2 and 3, 3 more than 2. Like, I know a lot of people like 2. For me, 3 I always loved more than 2. Like, 2 I really enjoy, but I feel like 3 was just way more fun because it had way more unlockables to me. And I guess 2 does have like an unbelievable unlockable, considering the fact that you can beat the game in one aspect, and then when you go back, you basically play an entirely different storyline. So it is kind of hard to argue that that isn't like the best unlockable you can get in the game, in like any game really. But 3 was always more entertaining than me. It had great unlockables. It had a ton of, well, it had like 5 costumes, which was a ton back then. But it was, both those games need to be redone. Like, there's no argument about that. They need to be remade like Resident Evil was. And I think everyone kind of wanted that to happen, especially when Resident Evil got remade and it came out as the best Resident Evil game ever. It was hard to be like, all right, we don't really want 2 and 3. So of course, Resident Evil 2 and 3 I really want redone. There's not much I can say about that. I just want them redone, and every year that goes by, it kind of seems less and less likely that we're going to get that. But I really hope we do. I love those games. I'd love to see Nemesis in HD just coming at me. Would be nuts. It would be really fun to play through. And, like seeing the lickers from Resident Evil 2 would be insane. It would be really fun. And I don't want them redone like Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. I just want them redone like they initially were. They don't have to change. If they did that where you could switch modes, that would be beautiful. I would love that. But they could just be redone like Resident Evil 1. Keep the pre-rendered areas and stuff and all that. Keep the story the same. It doesn't have to be kind of retcon like the Resident Evil remake was. There was, that was a great update to that game. I didn't find it necessary, but I certainly didn't hate it. I thought it was really cool that they added elements. But they don't need to do that to make it amazing. Like, those games are great as they are. If they just re-release them in HD, maybe some better voice acting and stuff, sure. But, that's really it. Like, if those were redone in HD, it would be great. Maybe add some unlockables like they did. They actually did that with the Resident Evil remake when they re-released it in HD. They added the Resident Evil 5 costumes for Chris and Jill. I thought that was actually pretty cool. So if they did that for 2 and 3, they could add in costumes. Like Leon would get his costume from 4, like he could get his jacket. Maybe they bring back the cool suit that he had in 4. They could give him his suit in Resident Evil 6. Maybe the unlockable crazy costumes in 6. I have no idea what Claire would get. I guess if they re-released them, she could get her costume that she has in the new Resident Evil, Resident Evil Revelations 2. They could give her that outfit as well. But she wouldn't really have any because unfortunately she hasn't been in a game since Code Veronica. So that's really it. And plus her costumes don't change because that's kind of her style, is that she has like a vest and then she has like the pants or whatever, and that's about it. So it's a little different from 2 to Code Veronica, but it wouldn't be too much of a difference as far as costumes. They'd kind of have to make some new costumes for her character. But that would be amazing to get to go through that game. Resident Evil 3, add a couple more costumes and stuff like that. To experience the initial Mercenaries mode in HD again would be really, really great, because Mercenaries mode changed. Like, once 3 stopped Mercenaries mode, as soon as 4 came out, it was a completely different thing. It wasn't the cool... Like, it's still fun. Mercenaries mode, don't get me wrong, I still love it. But the initial Mercenaries mode had more of the Resident Evil feel to it because it was actually scary. It was like, I have this many... I have this many items. I have this much time to get to the goal. The more zombies I kill, the more money I get, but that takes up time. If I kill them all in succession, I get more time and I get more money and stuff. So it was a great balance, and it was like you save people, you get more money, and it was just it was a tense balance. Like, you have 3 minutes to get from point A to point B, but you can kill zombies fast enough, you get more time. You save people, you get more time. You get weapons and all sorts of items from characters when you save them, and it was just really cool and really intense. And then when 4 came out, and 4, 5, and 6. It's not as intense. It's really just like kill the enemies and get as many points as you can, and it's still really fun to do because it's kind of the survival mode of that game, and that's actually pretty entertaining. But it doesn't have that same intense feel. Like, holy crap, I got 3 minutes, and even if I get there and I do it in a minute and a half, you can have as much time in the world, you won't get a bunch of money. And I did that before, which made me really mad because I did it. I guess some people will get this and some people won't, but I did it with the character Mikhail, and he only has a knife. He has like a knife and 1 herb, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna do this, and I actually made it to the end, and I thought because I used that character, it would kind of balance out and I'd get a bunch of money, and I still got nothing. Like, I made it, I didn't really kill any zombies because I had a freaking knife. So I made it to the end and I still didn't really get any money. I was like, that really sucks. But at the same time, I still have that memory. Like, I was finally able to do that when I went back, and I got it when I downloaded it on PlayStation. So that was really fun. The other games that I want from the Resident Evil franchise remade, I would love it if Code Veronica did get remade in like full HD and it was actually completely remade. Like, I have the HD re-release, but I would still buy it again if it came out with a full-on redo and makeover. That would be really, really cool to see. Get some voice actors back and stuff, and play through that game again would be really fun. Maybe add some unlockables to that, because I feel like that game kind of lacks with the unlockables and stuff. And I guess technically that one does have like a Mercenaries mode. It's kind of the same thing, and it's actually a little bit cooler because of the fact that they added the ability to go into first person. You can choose if you want to play it in first person, which is a really cool aspect of that extra mode. And I guess you do unlock stuff. I think I just never actually beat it, so I never unlocked whatever you do unlock with that. But definitely, I still think it needs some more. Like, I think in that one, it might only just be weapons, if weapons at all. Like, it could be costumes, but I highly doubt it would be costumes, because you can only, at that time, there was only like 1 costume for each character, so I doubt it's that. But still some more unlockables, add, new costumes for the characters, add, possibly add new weapons if they wanted to do it that way. But I would love to see that redone. I would actually love to see Outbreak 1 and 2 redone as well, because I never got to play those games, and with those being the first Resident Evil games you could actually play online, that was a huge deal for me. I just never got to play the games, and even if I did, during the time of PS2, it was a little bit odd to do online gaming and stuff like that. It was a little weird to be able to experience that. So if they re-release those games, it would be amazing. And they redid servers, or like made new servers and stuff, because of course, even if you have it and you can connect online, you can't actually play online in those games anymore. But if they re-released 1 and 2 and it was like, hey, you guys wanted these re-releases, here they are. Here's multiplayer again, so you can play as the zombies, you can play as the characters and stuff like that. And it would be really cool. It would be really fun to experience that. And not only would I be able to experience the multiplayer and the first multiplayer for Resident Evil ever, I would also be able to experience those games in full HD and really for the first time, because I played them like a tiny bit, but that was really it. And it's a little hard to justify buying them because I'd be missing out on such a crucial element like the multiplayer, and it would kind of just be there all the time. Like I just can't play like really the main thing I want to play in this game, which is the first ever Resident Evil multiplayer, not just online co-op or anything. It was like you play through, if you die you turn into a zombie, and stuff like that would be cool. And I'd love to see what that was like, because of course it's way different than playing Resident Evil 6 and you play as like a Juavo or whatever, because those characters move really fast like humans and stuff. And I don't know if that was really the case in Resident Evil Files. So that I would love to see those re-released. The other Resident Evil games, not so much. There's really only like one other, I guess two others that were on consoles that I wouldn't re-release, and that was Survivor and Survivor 2. Survivor 2 is actually not bad. I played that at the arcade one time, and it's basically Code Veronica in first-person mode. So you play through that, and it's kind of an arcade style. It's still very interesting because you still walk around the map, and basically you have to find a key so you can leave the level. Otherwise, Nemesis from 3 comes at you. So I thought that was kind of cool. I don't know if you actually get to see him or time runs out or whatever. That never actually happened when I played, but it was pretty fun. Each level has a boss and stuff. That was pretty cool. I think Resident Evil Dead Aim, I never got to play. I heard that one wasn't too bad. It kind of mixes Survivor with the regular Resident Evil games, because when you aim, it goes in the first person, but when you're not aiming, it's the regular camera style and stuff. So, those I don't really need. I wouldn't mind, I guess, if Deadshot was remade, because like I said, I never got to play that. So, and it didn't seem like it was deemed horrible, but it's also sort of a one-off type of thing that doesn't really have anything to do with the main franchise, so I'm not as concerned with that. But those are my top games that I want to see re-released in the future. I don't know if it'll ever happen. I highly doubt it. I would love it if they got, full-on remakes for some of the games, like I said, with Resident Evil 0. Probably just an HD upgrade or something. But I would love it if these games came out. They added new elements to them. They added multiplayer, like I said, to the Warriors and to the Star Wars Jedi Power Battles, because those games really fit for that. There are always multiple characters on screen. Just you could re-release them, add multiplayer. And like I said, this is probably way too hopeful. I think the most realistic would be Resident Evil 2 and 3 at some point. I don't know, that may never happen too, because the guy Shinji Mikami, who did the original Resident Evil games, he's the guy who now does like Bayonetta and Wonderful 101 and stuff like that. He's in that company now, Platinum Games. So that's all him. So if you didn't know that, now you know the guy who did Resident Evil has gone on to all other awesome stuff like Bayonetta. But those are the games that I want to see redone. There's some others as well, but these are the ones that really made my list. I'm sure there's like, I was trying to think of a lot of older games, and for the most part it was like, well, that game was okay, but if it was re-released in HD, it would just be like, I really only want it because I don't have it anymore, or this game's really just a fighting game. It will look cool, but really I could just get the later versions of the fighting game and it would probably be like the exact same thing. So there's some stuff that is still on there, like a couple of random things I was trying to think of. But I of course want to know what you guys want. Like, what are your top 5? If you have top 10 or something, like if you can have an actual substantial list compared to me, who it was just like, well, I just like these couple of games and that's all I really want. If you have a substantial list, please put that down in the comment sections below. I really want to know what games you guys have been waiting to see redone or still are waiting to have re-released. If it's like a really old game, or even if it's more recent, like it was something on GameCube that you just feel should be re-released or something like that. I definitely want to know. So please put that down in the comment sections below. If you guys have any topics that you want to hear me talk about, nerdy or not, please put those down in the comment section below as well. And of course, thanks for listening.